Hey guys, this video is about John Switzer, the fake cop, my last video, so if you want to watch that first, there's a link in the description. I'd recommend it. It sets up this video, and it's really interesting. So his case hasn't gone to trial yet, so there's not a lot of information out in the public about his work history and if he's actually a cop. So I did some research, and to get to the point early, he was never actually a police officer, and he never lived in New York. So just to recap who he is the guy that got mad at his neighbors in his trailer park for drinking at night and playing loud music, so he went over and handcuffed one of them. Once the real police arrived, he claimed to be a former cop.
And she was being very belligerent, and I wanted to keep her away. I put her in cuffs. I'm a former officer up in New York, and I'm just upset with her.
He also claimed to be a 9/11 first responder and told a really unbelievable story about it.
I worked like 80 hours at the Trade Center.
Gotcha.
I had a friend of mine that his mom died 2 weeks prior, and he had a tattoo on his hand that says, "I love you, Mom." And when we were crawling in there and everything, that's all we found. His arm from here down.
Sorry to hear that.
When asked about where he was employed, he struggled to explain exactly where.
And just to clarify, what agency are you prior law enforcement with?
New York
New York.
State. The state of New York. The city. I was a city cop.
NYPD?
NYPD.
In footage I didn't include in the last video, on the way to jail, he was unable to provide the name of his last supervisor.
Who was your last lieutenant there?
I'm sorry?
Who was your last lieutenant there?
Got it in my head somewhere.
All right, how about your last sergeant?
Pardon me?
How about your last sergeant?
On my last sergeant?
Yeah.
Well, Esposito was my last commissioner. And then, a lot of them have gone on since I've been gone.
What state were you born in?
Pardon me?
What?
California.
Now, I listened to it over and over, and I can't really tell what he says for his last commissioner, but here is a list of all the commissioners in the NYPD from around when he says he worked there, and I don't think any of them sound like what he said. I'd love to hear in the comments what you guys think about this. So I think all this raises suspicion that he wasn't a cop, but it's not definitive. Maybe he was traumatized by 9/11, or he just has a bad memory. He's old, and, that was 20 years ago. To research it more, I went to Facebook and found his account pretty much right away once I just narrowed it down to where he lived. Here's a picture of him on his account next to his mugshot, so you can clearly see that it's him. Now, the first interesting thing, I think, is under places he's lived, he states San Francisco and Florida. There's no mention of New York whatsoever, and on top of that, he graduated from a high school near Orange County in Florida. I think the strongest evidence, though, from his Facebook that really implies he was never a police officer in New York is his work history. It shows that he worked at Home Depot starting in 1999. On top of that, a lot of his friends on his friends list are Home Depot employees or former employees. I think that gives further credence to the idea that he was a Home Depot employee when he claims to have been a cop. Since all those people weren't actually involved in this crime, I'm not going to show their Facebooks. Then I signed up for Ancestry and found even more proof that his whole story was a lie and he's just playing cop like Jeremy DeWitt. First off, Ancestry has records that show he was born into the San Francisco area, which further connects the Facebook page to him. Through census data, Ancestry also shows that he clearly never lived in New York. In fact, John lived in Florida for the majority of his life, and I can assume since high school he has lived in Florida. So he claims to have worked for the NYPD for 20 years and retired in 2001. If that was true, he should have his address listed in New York sometime in the 90s. I think most of you guys were right in that John Switzer's story was a complete fabrication, and he definitely was not a 9/11 first responder. Given all this, I'd love to hear what you guys think about it in the comments. I loved reading all your comments in the previous video. A lot of you actually noticed that his story didn't really make sense, and now we know why.